Okay. Hello. Hello, Rory.
Hi, Japan.
Yeah, so today we're going to have a little presentation about our school and living in Moscow. My name's John. I work as one of the directors of studies at Simple English School. And Rory, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
My name is Rory, and I'm also one of the directors of studies, and I'm a teacher at Simply English as well. But we're both in Moscow right now, despite our slight difference in jobs.
Okay, so we're going to show you a PowerPoint, and this will be our presentation, Teaching English in Moscow and Simple English School. So let's move on to the introduction. So first, we're going to talk about why we're making this video, quite important. Two, what's it like living in Moscow? So we'll look at some positives and some drawbacks as well. Kinds of teaching jobs in Moscow. There's a huge variety of jobs, but of course you need to know the right people, the right place, or if you're a new teacher, for example, there are opportunities. The fourth one is why Simple English School, our school. And the last one is what's the application process like? And we'll give some tips on that. Okay. So, Rory, why are we doing this video?
Well, the first and foremost reason is that we really like Simply English. And so it's important to sort of shout that from the heavens because not a lot of people get to like their workplaces as much as we do. So I think that's the foremost reason. But also, just because we like it so much, everybody should come to Moscow and give it a try. Seriously, I don't think anyone would be disappointed with living here. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. When you mention Moscow, a lot of people think that's a bit exotic, but it's actually very close to Europe, for example. And even if you're from America, it's a lot closer to Asia, and it's really cool. It's a lot more open than people think. And also, another reason is the pandemic has led to a big shortage of jobs now, and there's going to be economic problems. So this is actually an opportunity because lots of schools in Moscow, well, Russia and other foreign countries are looking for teachers right now. And I think that's a good time to start talking about what's it like living in Moscow.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So I think
so
the thing that people will notice the most about Moscow is that because it's a major world capital, it's extremely busy and very fast moving all through the year.
yeah, there's actually an official 12 or 13 million people, but actually it's probably more like 16, 17 million. It's bigger than London and Paris, and it's really fast moving. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the kind of person you are. And what do you think about the weather, Rory?
Well, it's not there's no such thing as moderation in terms of weather. Unfortunately, it's either really cold or really warm. But it's really easy to deal with these things. So if we talk about the cold, then you can wrap up warm, and there are lots of shops with places to buy jackets that are pretty much cold proof. And in the same way, in the summer, it's very easy to find an air conditioner to help counteract that as well. And you have these sort of golden points towards the end of the spring and the start of the autumn, where everything is very well balanced. So you get a chance to enjoy some normal weather without taking any extra steps as well.
Yeah, one thing about the weather is um, it's really, really authentic, I'd say, unlike in Britain, where it's wet and cold or wet and warm. Here you get like four real seasons. You do get your summer and your winter, and then the things in between, basically. The one drawback would be sometimes at the end of winter, it can be a little bit wet and sludgy and not so beautiful. But as soon as spring is coming, like it is now, you get the trees turning green and it's all very beautiful.
Absolutely. And the infrastructure is developed enough in Moscow that they usually take care of that kind of thing pretty quickly in terms of in terms of water freezing quickly and making the roads dangerous. They're very fast at salting it. But it's still important to be careful in these situations too.
Yeah, they've got a huge workforce that basically de-ices the outside, but they also keep it litter free. I'd say Moscow is one of the cleanest cities in Europe I've been to.
We've talked about how it looks, but we should also probably talk about the things that you can do here. And I suppose there's the very obvious things like visiting Red Square and seeing the Kremlin, but there are other aspects of high culture as well. For example, close to the Kremlin and on the Red Square, there's the State Historical Museum, which is filled, it's like a treasure trove of artifacts from Russian history. You get the chance to go through, and it's extremely well priced. It's not expensive at all, so I would definitely recommend going there.
Yeah, there's ballet, opera, all these kind of things that's associated with high culture. But there's
Hmm.
also pretty much anything you can do. There's lots of bars, clubs. There's lots of entertainment complexes, including
Hmm.
cinemas, and pretty much like any huge city, you can do just about anything you want or find something very niche.
Well, we haven't talked about the parks though yet, although you have mentioned nature in the slides there. Moscow's got huge parks. Some of them are famous, like Gorky Park, but some of them are quite out of the way, like Kolomenskoye, and even some of the more smaller and isolated ones. So if you're not a person that likes to go out partying, then that's not a problem either, because you can always go out for walks in the park and experience the city that way.
Yeah, I mean, national parks as well. There's a national park on the edge of Moscow, and there's forests all around, so there's no shortage of nature, definitely.
Mhm.
And
And even if you're one of these people that burns through Moscow's entertainment quite quickly, it's not the case now, but as the pandemic starts to come to an end, Moscow is sort of a springboard for people to travel. But John, you've done much more than that than I have. So why don't you talk about that?
well, I've been to around over 50 cities in Russia, and there's different regions, different religions, cultures. You can see anything pretty much, but it's not just inside of Russia. You can go out of Russia to like Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, even the Stan countries, Mongolia, or if you're from America, for example, it might be a good opportunity for Eastern Europe or even Western Europe. It's like a perfect location. So I definitely recommend this place to travelers.
Definitely. And well, in terms of the work as well, the work is about as varied as the city itself and the things to do there. We talked a little bit about how it's closer to Asia. So even though Russia is closer to Asia than the rest of Europe, the salaries are much higher than than you would be paid in Europe. But they're also a little bit better. Oh, they're also quite similar to what you would be paid in Asia as an English teacher as well, right?
Yeah, some Asian countries it's on par, although
Mhm.
some countries like China, Vietnam do pay more. But the alternative is that Europe's a much more familiar kind of culture to adapt to. I've heard many teachers having culture shock when they go to places like China where they find it difficult making friends. So I find Moscow like a perfect compromise. It's close to Europe, like not only physically but also culturally, and the salary is quite good, better than most TEFL jobs in European countries, for example.
And because it's such a large city, there's a great many opportunities in terms of jobs, which we should probably speak about now, actually, since we are trying to talk about recruitment.
Sure. So there's lots and lots of different kinds of jobs. The first are the non-language related jobs. But for this, you need to be a specialist, probably with a master's PhD in something, and specially invited. And these are usually in like science or tech, or even in the English field, proofreading, translating, working as a governor or a course designer. You tend to need to know people who will invite you first. So it's not really a route for brand new teachers, for example, or people with few roots in Russia. And Rory, what can you tell us about private, public, and international schools here?
Well, in terms of those places, you definitely need a degree, and you definitely need a degree in teaching, which can be a barrier for some people who want to get into this kind of work, although sometimes exceptions are made. And usually they employ people already in Russia, whether that's Russians or people who have lived here for a long time. The pay is very good, but much like being a governor, the hours are long and the job is extremely demanding. And it's important to keep this in mind if you're thinking about these positions, because obviously Russia's, Moscow in particular is a place with lots of opportunities, lots of things to do. And a lot of people want to have the time to enjoy that, whereas in these more demanding jobs, you might not necessarily get that time.
And then you have the big private language schools, which is usually the main route into this kind of job. On the one hand, salaries can be quite low, hours long, but you do get good quality training, usually a good variety of classes because as they're bigger, they just have more clients. So you have different ages, levels, and maybe specialist English like exams. And they usually have like internal opportunities, but the management team can be quite hierarchical, and you could be just a small cog in a big organization. What do you think about big language schools, Rory?
I'm not a big fan now that we have this wealth of experience ourselves. However, if you are just starting to get into teaching, then it can be quite beneficial for you. The only thing I would say is because they're so large, it's easy to, well, you said it was like being a cog in the machine. What I would say is it's easy to become lost. So if you don't have your wits about you, then that can be a serious problem. However, there are opportunities that are there, like you said, because they're usually such huge organizations. And that's important to bear in mind as well. You want to find a place where you're comfortable too. But a lot of people prefer smaller companies because they're a little bit more personalized. And we should talk about those in a bit more detail too.
Yep. So the thing with small companies, there's a huge variety of them. Some specialize in children, kindergarten, or in business, for example. But I do need to make it clear that 90% of the market in Moscow is definitely kindergarten and primary. So if you've got this idea, I'm going to move to Moscow, go to a small company and teach business English, you're going to have huge competition because supply demand. And at
Mhm.
these schools, conditions can be very, very different. You can find a nice place with people who treat you well, pay you decently, or you can find people who are basically scammers and treat you awfully. What's your experience with this, Rory?
With small companies,
Yes.
I haven't any direct experience. However, in terms of what I've heard from people, what you've described is absolutely true. It's important to point out that the nightmares are few and far between, but when they do happen, it can be quite serious. So it's important to make sure that you check your employers thoroughly and make sure that you find the right place for you. And on the subject of the right place for us, we should probably move to our opinions about this because we should talk about simply English.
Yeah, so we're like a medium-sized school, and we specialize in kindergartens and primary schools. Although we do have some secondary schools, and we do work with private clients, but definitely kindergartens and public schools, private schools, working with primary is our main market. The salary, it's very competitive, in my opinion. Um, we hire native speakers, so the salary is a bit higher. We have shared accommodation available if you need it, for example, living with two other simple English teachers. The school takes care of all the documents, like registration, visa, for example, and they offer private health insurance, which is really, really useful and not something that all schools do. Can you talk about anything else, Rory?
Well, I was just going to talk about the quality of the accommodation in a bit more detail. For example, well, you're living in your apartment, John, by yourself, but I actually am in simply English accommodation now. And what I would say is it's very spacious, conveniently located, it's close to the metro, and well looked after. If you have a problem and you talk to the people who are in charge of the accommodation, then they fix it extraordinarily quickly. So it's very impressive. Even if you find the prospect of living with other people quite daunting, then this can be something that attracts you to it. Although I would say that the people that I'm living with now are absolutely brilliant. We've never had any problems aside from the technical issues with the plumbing, but we get that fixed really quickly. So I wouldn't be put off just when you see shared accommodation. There are things about this that are very beneficial. Like even though our accommodation is shared, I have my own room, which I think is absolutely essential for getting anything
And it's provided with a printer,
done.
if I remember correctly.
It is indeed, yeah. So the printer and the internet are paid for you, so you don't need to worry about that. And that is extremely useful for teachers, especially if you're preparing lessons on quite short notice, which can sometimes happen. Then you've got all of your material there with you, and you can just print it off.
Cool. And at Simple English, the owner, who's called Jack, he was a teacher himself, so he actually understands what teaching's like and what it's like moving to a different country and adapting. And he's actually a really great guy. He's very fair, he's professional, and the whole company is very professional, and everybody in the office is really, really nice. Of course, the company is profit driven, but which private company isn't? But on the other hand, unlike other private schools I've worked with, they really prioritize the teacher's happiness, even if it means not making quite enough profit as before. they're not into like squeezing teachers, like squeezing everything out of a teacher before they get unhappy and leave. They actually try to retain the teachers, keep them happy, because the longer a teacher stays, the better it is for the company, because the students know them, they get more experience, and it's good for your company reputation. What do you think, Rory?
I was just going to underline what you'd said. This is an extraordinarily, what was I going to say, unique attitude in comparison to a lot of private schools in Moscow, where people really are pushed, and the profit motive is very strong. And while our company is extraordinarily competitive in this respect, the respect that teachers get and the leeway that they're allowed is quite great, in comparison to other places. And that's important to bear in mind as well. Maybe if you don't want to stay in this kind of job forever, at the very least you could spend a year here becoming comfortable, and this would be a great place to do that too.
And other good reasons for working with Simple English? Well, there's academic directors that deal with the school, the schedule, and there's also people in the office that help you with the lesson planning. They'll observe you, give you good feedback, help you lesson plan, and help you improve in general. There's in-house programs which are expanding. So basically, if you're a new teacher, you'll have materials you can print out, a lesson plan in front of you, and your academic director will help you adapt the plan for your students. So hopefully this will cut down on lesson planning time and get you feeling more comfortable, more independent in the long term. There's opportunities to work with children at camps or work in the summer if you want to. So some people decide just to take a holiday in Russia or out of Russia in the summer, but there is work always available. And there's always the bi-weekly events like the pizza party or bowling excursions when the COVID situation improves. And it's always a lot of fun. And hopefully with new teachers, there'll be more participation and a better chance to get to know each other. Mhm. So Rory,
So, if all of that sounds great, then it's important to point out there are a few things to keep in mind, which are true of, I think, all language schools, but a lot of them don't explicitly mention it in their advertising. But we like to be upfront about these things. So, there are a few things to be aware of, John. Can you put up that slide? Great.
yep.
So, as we talked about in the very beginning, Moscow is extraordinarily busy, and a lot of jobs are distributed across the city, especially for teachers. So, you might have to start early in order to get to the school you teach at, or alternatively, you might have to spend some time commuting around the city. The metro is extremely fast, very efficient, and well placed, but some people aren't comfortable traveling a lot. So, that's something to keep in mind as well when you're thinking about applying to us.
And you're expected to dress professionally because a lot of the schools we work for, well, they deal with children and you're setting a good example. And especially the private schools, they might have different standards to the public schools, which is more smart casual. So it's important to be proactive basically and learn what your school expects and meet it, which leads on to the whole point about initiative. Our most successful teachers have initiative. We have very helpful staff here who will help you, give you advice. But if you're not proactive yourself in this profession, you'll end up in really bad situations or in uncomfortable situations, stressful situations, just making more work for yourself. I mean, for example, if at the school you go don't have a register, then make your own register. Actually speak to the teachers at the school, learn what the school's like, get their contacts in case there's any situations. They might be able to help you. Just small things like this. Try to be a part of our company. Try to be a part of the schools you're sent to. If you immerse yourself, you will definitely feel better in the long term because you'll build up those relationships. You'll be proactive. You'll be able to predict problems before they come, and life will just be easier for you. And anything else to mention, Rory?
Well, it's probably just important to point out that if you do find yourself facing any trouble, then you're not left in just completely helpless by yourself. So if you're not sure about how to adapt, even though you recognize there is a problem, then you can always talk to one of the academic directors or one of the administrative team, and they'll be able to help you because they've dealt with these situations lots of times before, and they'll be able to provide practical solutions to your problems. So maybe you have the initiative, maybe you recognize a problem, but you're not sure what to do about it. This isn't a problem either because what you can do is you can always talk to somebody, and there is always someone to talk to.
Don't be afraid to ask questions because that's our jobs basically.
Yeah.
So, so the next thing is actually applying for the company. What are we looking for?
Well, isn't everybody looking for perfect teachers? But don't worry, if you don't have that much confidence, then it's not a problem. The ideal candidates that we're looking for are candidates who have some sort of teaching English as a foreign language certificate, like Trinity, ESOL, or CELTA, which is, I think, a little bit more popular. However, there are other certificates. So if you don't have these two I mentioned, then that's not a barrier either. And again, ideally, you would have about a year's worth of experience working with young people, again, ideally in a primary school or in a kindergarten, where you were observed and given feedback so that you were able to progress there.
But if you don't, we still consider teachers with no experience because everybody has to start from somewhere. In this case, it really depends on your attitude, uh, your proactiveness, and even other experience with kids. Like, for example, I did volunteering before I went to university, and I volunteered at the Wildlife Trust in England, which works with nature. And sometimes we had to work with children, sometimes children with special needs, and like help them through nature. So this experience can easily be transferred across to teaching children. And that's what I
Hmm.
mentioned in my very first CV when applying for a teaching job.
In the same way, I spent about a year doing voluntary teaching before actually taking on a paid position in Moscow itself. So don't worry if, and as part of that, I didn't get any observation feedback at all, which was unfortunate, but it's a fact of life when you're doing volunteer work. So don't be put off by these things. Always try, at the very least, if you're enthusiastic about the job and you're prepared to put in the effort with your development, and that will show through. On the subject of things that you should be prepared for, we've already mentioned being prepared to commute and live in shared accommodation. But even if you're not prepared to do that, then it's still worth applying because you can always attempt to negotiate some sort of arrangement, especially in terms of accommodation. There's lots of places that people can rent by themselves. John's living in a place right now, for example, by himself. So don't be put off by that idea either. There's always something that can be done in that respect.
Yeah, and as I understand, at your school, Rory, the teacher has the option of actually staying in the school's accommodation 4 days a week if they want.
Absolutely, yeah. So some schools, you even get very lucky. Some schools in the region just outside Moscow provide accommodation or transport to the school itself. So in this sense, you have multiple options. I quite like being in the city, so I chose to live in the city. But if you wanted to spend your time there, if the option's available, then you're very welcome.
Yeah, I think there was a couple working there last year who
Mhm.
stayed there together 4 days a week in the nature. It was very nice. Then came back to Moscow 3 days a week in a simply English flat. So they had the best of both worlds. But everybody's different and the flexibility is great, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So now that we've
So
talked
once,
about, yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
I was going to say that we've talked about what you need to think about when you're applying. We should talk about the application itself. A lot of schools have an application form, but we don't, do we? What do we ask for?
So we just asked for the CV, to be honest. I mean, you can write a cover letter if you want, but if you do, make it genuine. In my opinion, if you write a generic cover letter, which can be copied and pasted, it's actually worse than not including a cover letter in general. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think some of these things are very long and impersonal and not they don't particularly endear to people. There's also the risk as well that you might copy and paste the name of a different school into your cover letter, and that would be very unfortunate and not create a very good first impression. So maybe you could write a small email or you could write a very long one explaining everything, but do make it about the school that you're applying to. In this case, make it about Simply English.
And of course, different countries have different standards for CVs. For example, I know in South Africa sometimes I get 7 pages, but to be honest, we understand cultural differences and will consider all CVs in any case and understand that different countries have different standards. But preference, in my opinion, is 2 pages maximum because you can include just the most important, relevant information for the job. And we do ask for a picture, which isn't the standard in some European American countries, but it's actually important in Russian jobs. So it's nothing to do with discrimination. It's just the Russian standard.
Of course, there will be things that we want to see specifically in your CV. So if you can focus especially on what your TEFL qualification is and your university education, not you don't have to include everything. Some people have got lots of qualifications, but if you make it specific to the job itself, perhaps you studied some modules in education at university, for example, then that would be something to highlight, not necessarily every single thing that you've done.
If you're having trouble cutting out qualifications and skills, experiences, think about it. What qualifications directly impact teaching, TEFL, and what can be related to teaching children, even hobbies and interests? How's it related to teaching primary kids? So once you've sent off your
Assuming your
application,
applications, yeah, I
oh,
was going to
sorry.
say, assuming that's all successful, you might want to, well, get ready for your interview. And that's what we're going to talk about now.
Yes. Okay. So
Sorry.
no problem. So first, it's very important, like all jobs, to research the company. Prepare genuine questions. Again, if you're asking stupid questions like how much do you pay, which is clearly on the job advertisement, then it shows that you're not doing your research. I mean, you might have some genuine questions about whereabouts your school will be in theory, where is accommodation located, or different accommodations located, or it might be something very personal for you. But if you want to prepare genuine questions, usually ask them at the end, unless it's very relevant to something the interviewer is saying right now. Another thing is you should be enthusiastic, show that you're interested in teaching kids. I mean, some people are more laid back, fine, but when you get into the classroom, you need to be active, you need to be friendly, and you kind of need to show this in the interview as well. But that doesn't mean speak, 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 ignore the interviewer, cut them off, be rude, or dominate them. Because in a classroom situation, would you do this to your children who are actually trying to learn a new language? I don't think it shows a very good impression.
No, it really doesn't. Although what does show that is being prepared for not just in terms of the research you've done, but being prepared to answer the questions that might come up in an interview, especially for a teaching position. So things like how to control difficult children, or how to deal with problematic behavior, or what kind of activities that you think children would respond to. Again, if you have experience, then this shouldn't be too much of an issue. But if you don't, then it's worth checking out this kind of information online beforehand. And there are lots of websites that will give you ideas that you could use in your interview. And indeed in the classroom once you pass your interview.
Yep. And of course, we'll ask the question about shared accommodation. Some people are really against it for some reason, but if you are, then you need to explain your alternative because it's not really likely that we're going to invite somebody who has no accommodation plans and refuse our accommodation plan without being proactive. Of course, we hire teachers from Moscow as well, and they might have their own accommodation already or no friends. That's totally fine. Again, it's just being proactive and being ready for the interview.
Absolutely. And of course, on the subject of being ready for the interview, you might already want to do your research on the school. And if you have a look here, there are some suggested links to follow. Not just the school's website itself, but you can check out our Instagram. And it's not on here. However, there are reviews by teachers on the website, but there are also reviews by teachers on websites like glassdoor.com, which you can check out too. But that brings us nicely to the end of this presentation. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you in Moscow.
Yep. Look forward to seeing you and good luck and goodbye.
Bye.